So this is one of the last things I shot because we found this tape. Let me mail this out to Tom, and maybe he can drop the tape off in the slot, at Blockbuster. So, and then Tom volunteered to go to this other video store, American Family Video. What I think is interesting about American Family Video is the owner says, yes, American Family Video, this was a video store for families, but we did buy independent stuff and low budget stuff. And she said, look, we had to be careful about what we bought to make sure it wasn't too crazy because it was a family store. The no budget and low budget stuff was actually still important to us. We just had to make sure we didn't buy crazy stuff and put it there for families to rent, So it was a weird thing because Blockbuster, the corporate part of Blockbuster, not owned by, a mom and pop, they were kind of keeping no budget and low budget off the shelf in bulk. They had a relationship with the studio system and they wanted all that stuff. I'm not talking about stores owned by individual owners. But what American Family Video showed, you should have bought more low budget and no budget films, Blockbuster, and you just should have had people watch them and make sure that there was nothing crazy in there, So this was like a random shot. It's very interesting with documentary. You never know what you're going to use. But Tom was panning over and showing different parts of the store. And it's just a shot of a U-Haul box. And I was like, oh, this is actually pretty poignant. I mean, that's what he was shooting. He was shooting the store being packed up. But for one reason, obviously, certain shots communicate better. So the U-Haul box is just like, oh, with the music, it kind of makes you feel like, oh boy, this is kind of a bummer. It's an end of an era, and I think some of these docs, that's what it was about. It was about kind of reviewing the era, what we lost, and sort of just coming to terms with it, So David Rochon's someone who did a lot of independent films that were edgy and pushed the envelope in regard to taste, violence or whatever. I think it's good that people watch this stuff and people remember it because ultimately, if you're going to look at how sanitized the stuff is in the mainstream now, it's kind of interesting to know you can go back and look at some crazy movie from the 90s or the 70s and they just went full out, like uncompromised violence or nudity or whatever. It is a strange phenomenon. There are certain films that push the limits. If you think of Cannibal Holocaust or I Spit on Your Grave, these are movies that are so extreme that they kind of made this name for themselves decades ago because of the controversy. But the ironic thing is they become so popular, the fame actually is a type of protection in a weird way. So you see, like I Spit on Your Grave, they did a remake of it and a sequel, and you start to say, you made a remake or a sequel of that, and there is a weird phenomenon where older films that really pushing the boundaries of taste are accepted because they're so old, and then you have newer contemporary filmmakers putting out stuff, something like Model Hunger, and people are just noping out of it right away. And I think part of it has to do with the newness of it. It's like, no, we can't have that, If people still keep going back to the film and it has an audience and it gains audience over years and retains that audience, it can kind of get past the filter of acceptability. Even The Toxic Avenger has scenes in it that are pretty extreme. I mean, these gang runs over a kid's head. The campiness and the gore and the heart that was in that film carried through, retained the audience, and it sort of got past the filter of people love it, So it really is interesting, like this concept of if it's good enough and there's something there, it can survive. Lloyd Kaufman conducted that interview with James Gunn, and I was allowed to use chunks of it for VHS Massacre too. But I was knowing full well that I was going to distribute it through Troma. Now you may say, okay, well, through fair use, could you have used a short clip of that? Yeah, possibly. You'd have to keep it fairly short in order to be responsible. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. When you're using fair use, always err way on the side of caution. I have permission to use most of the clips in my film, but if you didn't, I'd use less than 30 seconds, and then I'd probably just use less than 30 seconds of a movie trailer and not even the actual real footage, because trailers are meant for promotion. You just have to be real careful with it. Both of these films were able to get errors and omissions insurance through Troma, so my paperwork was good enough where it could be insured, and that's why you need to have all your ducks in a row with your paperwork. If you don't have everything accounted for, a distributor just may not want to mess with it. It just may be too problematic. I love the fact that Joe Bob recommends film school. I think it's and I'm very much in line with what he's saying. It's like, yeah, look, however you get to the film school, maybe you go through some tutorials online or whatever. But the thing that and for instance, you can study film at a lot of community colleges in your state, commutable. So you're spending very little money and you're going to community college. Maybe you finish at a 4-year or whatever, but because for those 2 years or whatever, you'll live the filmmaking part of it. You'll learn about cameras and different file formats and Kodaks and editing. You'll learn about cameras and lenses and lighting and audio. And some of the stuff you may roll your eyes at and go, oh, well, I don't have to do it that way anymore. If you dedicate yourself to the training, it should matter and it should make a difference. Now, if you're going to talk about spending $250,000 to go to film school at an expensive private college, that's up to you. It's a lot of dough. If you want to make independent films, that's definitely, you might not need to do that. If you want to work in the studio system, or, a lot of major companies have people who shoot and cut video for them, a lot of that is corporate work, and a lot of it will require a degree. These conglomerates have sort of bought up the studio system and all that, so if you're working within house, you may have to have a degree. So it's something to consider. But if you're a no-budget filmmaker or you're an independent filmmaker, you don't need a degree. You just need training. James Rolfe, super cool dude. Never met him in person, but I'm such a big fan of his, and he had somehow seen VHS Massacre 1. And I was like, hey, can I use... I know you put it on independent film, and it was pretty successful. It's a really good example of independent filmmaking, and could I show clips and use a few things? He's like, okay, because I had some questions for him, and he's like, all right, I'll do a quick interview. So the fact that James Rolfe and Joe Bob and Lloyd Kaufman, they're all involved in these films, it's a really good feeling. It's a culmination of a lot of different things, so it felt like a real victory. I only had to make independent films for 25 years to have, let's say a tiny bit of clout to pull this project together. So, that's something to remember as well. You have to be really dedicated to this. It's not something that's probably going to happen on your first try. But, there are different victories in making feature-length, no-budget independent features. So, if you write your script, there's a victory in finishing the script. There's a victory in scraping together the few grand you're going to need to make it. There's a victory in shooting it and completing that shoot. And there's a victory in having all your footage and sitting down to edit. And that should be fun. Editing can be difficult, but it's really satisfying. With no-budget filmmaking, it's a real gift. You can fix a lot in post, and you will need to. But it's a wonderful challenge. And just think of it like this. You probably took at least a year to get your film pre-production and then shoot your film, get it in the can. You can spend a good year and edit. Take your time. Have fun with it. And then when you're done with it, you can look into film distribution. This is one of the last things we shot. Tom Poirier shot this in Bend, Oregon, and was a real delight. He was able to go back and do this. It meant a lot for the documentary. That's basically it. So this is the final video in the series. Just wanted to say thanks to everyone for watching these videos, and thanks for getting through to the end here. Making an independent film can be one of the most satisfying things you'll do in your life. That has always been a badge of honor and a badge of success to make a feature-length film and get it distributed. It's a mark that very few people hit. It's all about effort. If I can do it, you can do it. It's not rocket science. It's just time and pressure, as Andy Dufresne said in Shawshank Redemption. Before I forget, if you need music for your film, I go to Tim Kulig Free Music. He's my best friend. He makes good music. He's got over 500 songs available for anyone to use royalty-free. And there's also Kevin MacLeod, the king of royalty-free. There's other sites like Pond5 and stuff like that as well. Thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you next time.